Okay, what we've got here is a title sequence for a thriller, and we went and filmed with some students recently and got this footage, which you can see down here, and I thought I'd get a copy of the footage and put it together to show you how you could edit and film your own title sequence for a thriller. What I've got here is Shutter Island's initial opening sequence, and I've very loosely based it on that. I've actually stolen the soundtrack of that, but of course you're going to do your own soundtrack, and I'm sure it's going to be even better. So you can see it's a montage of these atmospheric shots, high contrast and dark, gloomy, moody, eerie looking shots put together, and the titles are over the top of those. Okay, so you get the idea of what we're trying to achieve, and that's what you've always got to do. You've always got to do your research and then see what you're trying to achieve and see how you can get mood within your own shots. So if we go to the title sequence, you can see how I've started it off. I've grabbed the Film 4 ident. That's just to show that I understand who the backers for my film might be, the distributors, that sort of thing. And then I've also created a little production Silhouette Pictures logo there, if it doesn't lag, and started my soundtrack whilst that comes on. Okay, and that's just a simple picture and Silhouette Pictures coming out from behind the picture. So very basic, but I have looked at other idents to try and get ideas about how a production company might show their logo. So there is a bit of research behind that, so make sure again you've got some sort of inspiration there. You're not just going from scratch, you are thinking about what others have done before you. Okay, let's go to our footage then. And this, the first shot here is an establishing shot. And that's probably, well, it's the classic editing system, and you can do the same with your titles. So you go from an establishing shot to establish the scene, then you start moving closer in to get the expressions or actions, that sort of thing. So this follows the classic editing system where you've got an establishing shot which shows the scene. And in this scene we've got sort of supposedly desolate area with not much going on. Would have been nice actually if the fence wasn't there, because then it shows even less sort of inhabitants, as it were. And the whole point of, in fact I should say, this title sequence is that this person is running away from something. What, we don't know. That's kind of the Enigma code, but you'll see what I mean in a second. And we've got the shot, there's our star, Darren. Absolutely fantastic performance from him. And that really makes a difference. It's worth saying that if you get someone who can perform, who can act, it will help your title sequences. It will probably help you get a mark as well. And it shouldn't be graded on mark, but it just makes it so much easier to... Sorry, it shouldn't be graded on performance, but it does make it that much easier to edit when you've got a good performance there. And Darren was dressed up in a boiler suit, if I take you to a later shot. And he's even got bare feet, if you can see them just there. Yeah, his hands are tied, he's always looking around him, and it wasn't particularly nice because it was really cold and his feet must have been absolutely freezing. So again, he's put the extra effort in for the students, so well done, Darren. And it's come up with this good footage, and he gets really muddy later on as well and falls in a river and all sorts, but it adds to the atmosphere of these shots. Okay, so we've got that establishing shot, and he rolls across the scene. If we see here, I'll just play that again quickly. Rolls across the scene and then exits out the other side. In fact, I don't think he meant to slip over there, but it was that wet and miserable that he slipped over again. I won't show you the titles, I'll show you those in a minute, but what I've got, as you can see, is the footage here, and then I've gone for this sort of footage, then title, then footage, then title. That's one way you can do it. Particularly actually if you want to fill up space, you can sort of go out and get some shots for your titles separately from the rest of your footage, and it can help to add a certain ulterior mood, and it offers up different types of Enigma code if you didn't want a long sequence of footage that was the same. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. I'll just show you these other pieces of footage. This one's using a tripod as a Steadicam. and it's quite a tricky technique. Ideally you'd use a proper Steadicam, but tripods do work because they counterbalance the weight, so you hold it carefully and don't grab hold of it, otherwise the shake comes through. We hold it carefully, and we're running along behind Darren here. You can see that it's just moving gently. What I also have done with the footage is that I put it into slow motion. Now if you were, I don't know what the group are going to do with this themselves, but I think it adds atmosphere, so I've put it in slow motion. But if you made that decision before you go out, which hopefully you will be, you want to shoot at 50 frames per second rather than at 25 frames per second. You can probably see it's a tiny bit juddery. It doesn't look too bad actually, it looks okay, but at 50 frames per second that would look even smoother. And also slowing down the footage will make it look that bit smoother, so it doesn't have to be as steady. And we're filming with a DSLR here, so they don't have as good an image stabilization as DV cameras and other such things. Okay, so you can see that Steadicam shot again from the side here, running across alongside Darren. Okay, so we've got the establishing shot, and then we're slowly getting in closer, so we've got a mid shot sort of, and then a bit of a long shot there, but it's difficult to get the shots right when you're doing that Steadicam technique. And then we move to this shot here where he runs behind a tree, and the camera starts moving in closer still. And you want to go close in for thrillers because that adds tension. So the closer you get, the more tense it feels. And then again, the camera moving in closer to Darren's face. And again, his selling it. The other thing that he's doing is running off shots. So although he's not doing it in these particular bits, but in the first one he runs into shot and out of shot, makes it easier to edit. And again here, so we're in, he runs, should we say here, sorry, he gets up and runs out of shot. That's quite handy because like it's easier to edit these things. And then later on I think this is worth mentioning. Again, we've gone further out here, but that's fair enough because there's a bit of action happening. Could have possibly gone into this section here, might have been a better shot, but because there's a lot of action in the frame of him crawling around, that's worth seeing, so we don't want to go close in yet. But then you can see there's a cut here, and we've actually got a continuity edit where we go closer in. So he's put his head down, and then I've cut it for when he brings his head back up again. So obviously this wasn't filmed from there, it was filmed a bit earlier than this, and I've cut them both together to try and make it look like it was at the same time with the continuity edit, obviously. Now what's worth mentioning about this footage is you can tell that with the DSLR you can see the depth of field, which is the sort of area of focus, and it's quite a shallow depth of field, and that's what DSLRs are good at, especially if you're at a little bit of a distance. Your depth of field gets even shorter, and you can see this bit's out of focus, this bit's out of focus, and our attention is drawn in here to where Darren is, and he's looking up and things. If you've got a DV camera, you'd probably get most of this in focus, so it wouldn't draw your attention. So that's why it's nice to use DSLR sometimes, or most of the time in fact, so you can do that shallow depth of field, and it's very filmic look as well. Okay, and then later on Darren jumps over a fence here, and this is where he really gets his money's worth out of Darren. He falls down this really slippery bit into the river. Absolutely fantastic. He must have been absolutely dying there. He didn't really need to act at that point, and falls over. Okay, the one thing I would say about this footage that the students got, it's very grainy because it was so dark here. They had to put the ISO up. You're much better changing the aperture if you can than putting the ISO up, because it does create grainy images. Okay, so that's a little bit of a mistake, but you can't really notice it on the screen capture, and I don't think you really notice it in the edit either, so it's alright. And the last shot is just of Darren there. I mean, it would have possibly been worth getting in close here, sort of maybe tracking across to his face there for the last shot, and then it's a fade out. Okay, so simple sequence, and you get the idea that he's running away from something, some sort of institution, or somewhere where he's been tied up. You know, these are all Enigma codes that hopefully you're going to put into your title sequence. Okay, So if I go through with the titles, these are the things that I've done. I've just filmed some simple things to give you an idea of how easy it is to create something that looks okay, that can go into your title sequence. I mean, you could obviously have the titles coming over these bits of footage, but to fill in the gaps, as it were, because there isn't enough footage, I've put in some simple titles. So here you can see I've tried to get this sort of effect that looks like bars going across some bars, and then the text moves the opposite direction, quite simply fades in and fades out. And can't remember which, I did look at a title sequence to get the idea for a film by, and then a bigger name and that sort of thing. But again, research is the key here. So look at title sequence, look at the fonts they use, that sort of thing, to get an idea. This actually is me filming my radiator, because it's got bars at the top like this, and then I've really reduced the brightness, and it's just very subtle bars. So quite a simple effect, but it works. Okay, the next one, I've shot my road outside my house. It's raining, and the street lamp's coming across, and there's a shadow in there. Put it in slow motion, and it looks moody and atmospheric. And again, that slight movement, text, and then fade out. So quite simple. There's two more ideas that I've used. I've shot some trees outside my window, and put them in slow motion, reduce the brightness. Simple stuff, but again, it adds that mood and atmosphere. And then we've got, lastly, this is actually a close-up of an eye. I don't know whether you can see it on the screen capture. Simple idea again. And what I actually thought would be a good idea is to blink, so that if it's so dark that you can't see it's an eye, you will when it blinks, hopefully. It just gives it that sort of eerie look. And then I've called it Subject 17. It doesn't have to be called Subject 17, but it's quite simple. It just comes up with Subject 17. But again, paying a bit of attention to the types of fonts that might be used for title sequences. You don't have to go overboard with your fonts. You don't have to have them exploding in or bursting into flames. That doesn't happen in title sequences, so don't put it in yours. And it's usually fairly simplistic, unless it's a James Bond title sequence or something like that. Okay, that's probably all that's worth mentioning. Obviously there's a lot of things to do with title sequences, but that you can gather, and hopefully you'll do your research of your own thing, but that should have given you enough ideas of how you can edit your own title sequence. If you want to see the full title sequence that I've done here, and you want to see Darren getting splashed into the water again, then have a look at the link below. Okay, thanks for watching.